The Krathari Xenobiology Academy had produced 17 Nobel laureates, 43 interstellar peace negotiators, and exactly 0 graduates who had ever questioned why the most prestigious institution in the galaxy kept its human studies department on the 37th floor behind 3 different security checkpoints. Professor Vexthul adjusted his neural interface and watched his students settle into their biocompatible seating arrangements. The semester's final unit always drew the largest crowds, partly because advanced predator studies was a mandatory credit, but mostly because nobody could resist learning about the galaxy's most efficient killers. Today's subject had emptied the other lecture halls. "Earth's Homo sapiens," he announced, his chitinous mandibles clicking with what passed for academic excitement among his species, "represents the most sophisticated ocular predation system ever documented." A Vorthon in the 3rd row made a noise like steam escaping a damaged coolant pipe. Fearful anticipation, if Vexthul interpreted the sound correctly. Good. Fear kept students attentive. "The human eyeball," he continued, gesturing toward the holographic display materializing above his lecture platform, "is positioned frontally on the skull in what xenobiologists call the death stare configuration. Unlike civilized species who evolved with eyes on the sides of their heads, providing maximum environmental awareness for survival, humans developed binocular vision exclusively for tracking and killing prey. Cadet Thekvar, whose fur was already standing at nervous attention, raised one of his 6 arms. "Professor, my pod clutch always told stories about humans who could stop a Quelix mid-flight just by looking at them. Superstition, right?" Vexthul's expression grew solemn. "Cadet, your pod clutch survived the Great Migration. They didn't tell stories. They shared tactical intelligence." The holographic display shifted, now showing a 3-dimensional model of human ocular anatomy. Several students in the back rows shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Silenti delegation began their characteristic stress humming. "Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story." "Notice the iris structure," Vexthul continued, using his laser pointer to highlight specific features. "Variable aperture control allows humans to function in lighting conditions that would blind or incapacitate most species. More disturbing still, observe the sclera, the white portion surrounding the iris." "What about it?" asked Yilnara, her gill slits fluttering with anxiety. "Every other sapient species in the galaxy has dark sclera. Camouflaged eye movement prevents prey from detecting where we're looking. Humans evolved with bright white sclera for a single reason: intimidation. They want their prey to know exactly where they're looking." A collective shudder rippled through the amphitheater. The Gexan representative made a sound like grinding glass, his species equivalent of a whimper. "But surely," interrupted Cadet Korthan, his tentacles writhing nervously, "surely they can't actually harm someone just by looking?" Vexthul's mandibles spread in what his species used for grim satisfaction. "Documented cases include full-body paralysis, involuntary submission responses, and complete psychological domination. The human stare-down has ended conflicts without a single physical blow being exchanged." "How do they coordinate pack attacks?" Yilnara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Micro-movements of the ocular muscles. Humans can communicate complex hunting strategies through eye contact alone. A slight narrowing here, a directional glance there. Their prey never realizes they're being herded until it's far too late." The holographic display cycled through what Vexthul had labeled human hunting configurations, analytical breakdowns of facial expressions recorded from various encounters. Wide-eyed surprise, labeled target acquisition mode, squinting concentration, active tracking phase, and the particularly unsettling direct stare, final approach vector. "Now," Vexthul said, his voice dropping to the conspiratorial tone that made him legendary among student gossips. "Who can tell me what happens when a human achieves complete eye contact with its target?" Silence stretched across the amphitheater like a held breath. Finally, Cadet Morduk spoke up from the front row. "Total neural shutdown?" "Psychological colonization," suggested another voice. "Instant death?" offered someone from the back, hopefully. Vexthul nodded approvingly at each guess. All documented responses. But the most insidious aspect of human ocular predation is its subtlety. Humans can maintain eye contact for extended periods, sometimes entire conversations, while their prey remains completely unaware of being hunted. That's when Cadet Zara Blackthorn raised her hand. She'd been sitting quietly in the middle section, taking notes like any other student. Her bipedal posture didn't particularly stand out in a classroom designed for dozens of different body configurations. Her forward-facing eyes weren't unusual either. Several species had evolved similar arrangements for different reasons. But when she raised her hand and smiled, the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Yes, Cadet." Vexthul consulted his roster, though he knew perfectly well who she was. The administration had briefed him extensively on the human exchange student. "Blackthorn, sir, I had a question about the eye contact mechanics you described." Every head, pseudopod, and sensory cluster in the room turned toward her. Vexthul noticed that several students were already calculating escape routes. "Certainly, Cadet Blackthorn. What specifically interests you?" Zara's smile widened slightly, a micro-expression that sent half the class into visible distress responses. "Well, Professor, what exactly do you think happens when humans make eye contact with each other? Other?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vexthul's mandibles twitched as he processed the implications. Around the amphitheater, students leaned forward despite their obvious terror. This was either going to be the most educational moment of their academic careers, or their last coherent memory before psychological domination. "An excellent question," Vexthul managed, his voice maintaining professorial calm, despite the fact that his species' fight-or-flight responses were currently voting unanimously for flight. Human-to-human ocular combat represents the apex of predatory evolution, two apex hunters engaging in direct visual warfare. Zara tilted her head slightly, another micro-movement that caused visible panic in the third row. "Combat?" "The establishment of dominance hierarchy through sustained eye contact. Winner takes all territorial and reproductive rights. Loser typically experiences complete psychological submission, or, in extreme cases, catatonic shutdown." "Huh," Zara said, still smiling that terrifying human smile. "And you learned this from studying humans directly?" "Extensive field research and survivor testimony," Vexthul replied, though something in her tone was beginning to concern him. "The Galactic Survey Corps has documented thousands of encounters." "Survivor testimony," Zara repeated thoughtfully. "From species who survived making eye contact with humans." "Precisely." "But not," she continued, her voice taking on a tone that somehow managed to sound both innocent and predatory simultaneously. "From humans who survived making eye contact with each other." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of profound absence of sound that occurs when an entire room of beings suddenly realizes they may have made a fundamental error in reasoning. Cadet Thekvar's fur was now standing so straight it resembled a personal force field. What are you suggesting, Cadet Blackthorn?" Zara looked around the room, making brief eye contact with several students in sequence, a casual gesture that caused immediate instinctive crouching, protective coloration changes, and in one case, complete temporary paralysis. "Nothing major," she said cheerfully. I'm just wondering how you developed your theories about human behavior without ever asking humans what we actually do. Professor Vexthul felt something cold and unpleasant settle in his digestive tract. Something that might have been the first stirring of academic doubt or prey recognition response. Cadet Blackthorn, he said carefully, are you implying that the documented research on human ocular predation contains inaccuracies? Oh, I'm sure your research is very thorough, Zara replied, her smile never wavering. But I think there might be one tiny detail you got wrong. Which would be everything. The word hung in the air like a detonated mine, and Professor Vexthul discovered that 30 years of academic tenure had not prepared him for having his life's work dismissed by a creature that, according to his research, should have been psychologically dominating him by now. Cadet Blackthorn, he said with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb while blindfolded. Perhaps you could elaborate on your perspective. Well, Zara said, settling back in her seat with the casual comfort of someone completely unaware she was causing mass psychological distress. You mentioned that humans never make eye contact except during territorial disputes or mating displays. Correct. Far too aggressive for routine interaction. Right. So where exactly did you observe this behavior? Vexthul's mandibles clicked uncertainly. Extensive field studies, as I mentioned. The research is quite comprehensive. Field studies of humans in their natural habitat. Well, no. Direct observation would be prohibitively dangerous. We analyzed recordings from diplomatic encounters, trade negotiations, and first contact scenarios. Cadet Morduke leaned forward, his carapace gleaming with nervous perspiration. My hive cluster encountered humans during the Centauri conference. The ambassador stared directly at our speaker prime for nearly 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Our delegation was convinced it was a declaration of war. Understandable response, Vexthul nodded gravely. What was the outcome? Total submission. We agreed to every human trade proposal. Couldn't risk prolonged ocular combat. Zara made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. The effect on her classmates was immediate. Protective shells snapped shut, warning pheromones flooded the air, and Cadet Yilnara's gill slits clamped tight in preparation for emergency breathing. Sorry, Zara said quickly, noticing the panic. It's just, that wasn't aggression. Your ambassador was probably trying to show respect. Humans consider eye contact polite. The silence that followed was so profound that the Academy's atmospheric processors seemed unusually loud. Thekvar's fur ruffled in patterns that suggested imminent mental breakdown. Polite? Basic courtesy, really. If someone's talking to you and you don't make eye contact, we assume you're not paying attention, or being deliberately rude. Professor Vexthul felt his carefully constructed worldview beginning to develop stress fractures. Cadet, are you suggesting that humans engage in direct ocular contact during casual conversation? Constantly. With multiple individuals? In sequence? Sure, at parties, meetings, restaurants, pretty much anywhere people gather. Cadet Korthan's tentacles had twisted themselves into what his species used for catastrophic anxiety. How do you determine dominance rankings? Who gets to reproduce? Zara blinked, an action that sent several students diving behind their desks. We don't determine dominance through eye contact. We have actual conversations about things. But the psychological colonization, insisted Yilnara from behind her protective desk barrier. The neural paralysis effects. I'm sorry, the what now? Vexthul consulted his tablet, scrolling through decades of accumulated research. Documented physiological responses to human eye contact include elevated stress hormones, involuntary muscle tension, and, in severe cases, complete cognitive shutdown. In other species, Zara said slowly, beginning to understand the scope of the misunderstanding. You're describing how other species react to humans looking at them. Precisely. The human ocular weapon system is remarkably effective across multiple physiologies. It's not a weapon system. The volume of Zara's voice caused half the class to activate emergency breathing apparatus. It's just looking at people. Demonstrate, said a new voice from the back of the amphitheater. Everyone turned to see Cadet Drexhai, whose species had evolved from ambush predators before achieving sapience. If anyone could withstand human ocular assault, conventional wisdom suggested it would be a Nexhari. Demonstrate what? Zara asked. This casual eye contact you describe. Show us non-aggressive human visual interaction. Professor Vexthul's academic instincts warred with his survival reflexes. Cadet Drexhai, that could be extremely dangerous. I volunteer as test subject. My neural structure is specifically adapted to resist predatory gaze weapons. Zara looked around the room at dozens of creatures cowering behind improvised fortifications. You want me to look at him normally? If such a thing is possible, Drexhai said, rising to his full impressive height. His species had evolved redundant nervous systems specifically to counter paralysis attacks. Proceed with your polite eye contact. This is ridiculous, Zara muttered, then looked directly at Drexhai and smiled. Hi there. Nice weather we're having. Drexhai's primary nervous system shut down immediately. His backup consciousness lasted approximately 2 seconds longer before his emergency tertiary brain functions triggered full hibernation protocols. He toppled backward with a sound like a falling tree. Drexhai! Yilnara shrieked, though she remained safely behind her desk. Oh no, Zara said, half rising from her seat. Is he okay? I was just being friendly. Her movement toward the fallen student triggered every prey instinct in the room simultaneously. Emergency protocols activated automatically. Blast shields descended from the ceiling. Atmospheric scrubbers began filtering for hostile pheromones, and the Academy's security systems started broadcasting lockdown warnings. Remain stationary, announced the automated defense system. Predatory species detected. Initiating containment protocols. I'm not predatory, Zara protested, which only made things worse. I was trying to help. Cadet Thekvar, speaking from inside what appeared to be a portable bunker, addressed Professor Vexthul. Sir, she's displaying classic, hunting behavior, the false concern, the approach vector toward the disabled prey, textbook apex predator methodology. I can hear you, Zara said pointedly, and I'm not hunting anything. I'm worried about your classmate. The verbal misdirection is particularly sophisticated, observed Morduk from his reinforced shell. She's attempting to convince us that predatory stalking is actually concern and friendship. Remarkable psychological manipulation. Vexthul was frantically consulting his emergency procedures manual. Cadet Blackthorn, please return to your seat and avoid any sudden movements. We need to assess Cadet Drexhai's condition. He just fainted, Zara said with growing exasperation. Probably from stress. If you'd just let me. Do not approach the fallen prey, the security system announced. Human pack hunting behavior identified. I'm not in a pack. I'm by myself. Lone wolf methodology, Thekvar whispered reverently. Even more dangerous than coordinated attacks. Zara slumped back into her seat, finally beginning to grasp the magnitude of the situation. You all think I'm some kind of monster, don't you? Not a monster, Professor Vexthul said carefully, having located the relevant diplomatic protocols. A highly evolved apex predator with advanced psychological warfare capabilities. We teach our children to make eye contact with adults, Zara said quietly. It's basic manners. The collective intake of breath from every conscious student could have powered a small atmospheric processor. You train your young, Yilnara whispered in horror, to psychologically dominate other species from childhood. We train them to be polite. By weaponizing their ocular systems against authority figures, Morduk observed, with what sounded like grudging admiration. Brilliant long-term strategy for galactic conquest. Zara put her head in her hands, a gesture that caused immediate panic, as students interpreted it as either a preparation for enhanced sensory targeting or an elaborate intimidation display. This, she said to nobody in particular, is going to be a very long semester. Dean Clixandra arrived 17 minutes later, which was impressive considering she'd been in the middle of a budget meeting 3 buildings away when the emergency alert reached her. She was followed by what appeared to be half the Academy's emergency response team, all wearing equipment that looked suspiciously like riot gear designed for subduing large predators. "Status report," she demanded, her crystalline vocal cords producing the kind of tone that had negotiated 17 interstellar treaties and 3 ceasefires. Professor Vexthul, who had spent the intervening time crouched behind his lecture podium, emerged with the careful dignity of someone pretending the last 20 minutes hadn't completely destroyed his professional reputation. "Minor incident involving the human exchange student," he reported. "Cadet Drexhigh is unconscious but stable. No apparent physical trauma." Define minor incident. Unauthorized deployment of ocular warfare during a classroom demonstration. Dean Clixandra's mineral-based biology didn't allow for traditional expressions, but the way her faceted surface caught the light suggested what other species might recognize as barely controlled fury. "Professor, did you just tell me that you allowed a human to use psychological warfare techniques on students? In the interest of scientific inquiry? In the interest of not having the Galactic Education Consortium shut us down permanently," the dean interrupted. "Please explain why you thought this was academically sound." From her seat in the middle of the now empty amphitheater, Zara raised her hand again. The gesture sent several of the emergency responders reaching for equipment that definitely wasn't standard educational material. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Could someone please explain what you think I did wrong? Because, from my perspective, I said hello to someone and he fell over." Dean Clixandra turned her attention to Zara, with the careful precision of someone examining a particularly dangerous artifact. "Cadet Blackthorn, according to Professor Vexthul's report, you engaged in direct ocular contact with Cadet Drexhigh while displaying aggressive facial configurations." I smiled at him and said it was nice weather. "Threat display accompanied by territorial vocalizations," translated Emergency Coordinator Keshitar, consulting a tablet that appeared to be running real-time threat assessment algorithms. "Classic intimidation sequence. It wasn't a threat display. It was just being friendly." The emergency team exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey both professional skepticism and existential terror. Coordinator Cheshitar made a note on his tablet. "Cadet Blackthorn," Dean Clixandra said with the patience of someone defusing a bomb while explaining quantum mechanics to a child. "Are you claiming that humans engage in direct eye contact as a form of social bonding?" "Yes, finally, someone gets it." "With strangers?" "Sure." "Without establishing dominance hierarchies first?" "We don't have dominance hierarchies based on eye contact." Coordinator Cheshitar looked up from his tablet with obvious alarm. "Dean, she's claiming humans have evolved beyond territorial competition. This suggests either advanced pack cooperation or sophisticated deception capabilities." "Or," Zara said with growing frustration, "we just talk to each other like normal people." "Define normal," Dean Clixandra requested. "Having conversations, asking how someone's day went, discussing the weather. You know, social interaction." The dean's crystalline structure resonated with what might have been thoughtful humming. "Professor Vexthul, has your research covered human social interaction patterns?" "Extensively. Vexthul replied, though his confidence seemed somewhat shaken. Humans utilize sophisticated pack coordination strategies, complex hierarchy establishment through sustained eye contact, territory negotiation via proximity maintenance, and resource allocation through verbal competition. You mean conversations, Zara said flatly. Ritualized verbal dominance displays, Vexthul corrected. Your species has simply evolved more subtle methods of establishing social order. We have book clubs. Competitive intellectual combat, Coordinator Keshatar noted on his tablet. Resource competition through knowledge displays. We have dinner parties. Communal feeding rituals designed to establish pack loyalty and identify potential threats. We have coffee dates. Stimulant-enhanced interrogation sessions, Emergency Medic Yarthok suggested helpfully, from where he was still monitoring Drexhai's vital signs. Zara stared at them with the expression of someone watching reality slowly dissolve around her. You've managed to turn every single aspect of human social behavior into some kind of military strategy. Your species is remarkably sophisticated, Dean Clixandra acknowledged. The level of psychological manipulation required to convince entire populations that predatory behavior is social bonding suggests evolutionary development far beyond anything we've previously encountered. It's not manipulation, it's just how we act. Precisely, the Dean agreed. So thoroughly integrated into your behavioral patterns that you genuinely believe your own deception protocols. Fascinating adaptation. Zara looked around the room at dozens of emergency personnel who were treating her like a combination of natural disaster and psychological warfare experiment. This is insane. You're all insane. Defensive projection, observed Coordinator Seshatar. When confronted with evidence of their predatory nature, humans attempt to characterize other species as irrational. What evidence? I haven't done anything except exist in your general vicinity. Cadet Blackthorn, Dean Clixandra said gently. You rendered an advanced combat-trained Nexhari unconscious, using only ocular contact and verbal communication. From our perspective, this represents a clear demonstration of hostile capabilities. He fainted because he was scared. Not because I attacked him. Fear response indicates successful predatory intimidation, Medic Yarthok reported. Textbook psychological domination. Zara slumped forward, putting her elbows on her desk and her head in her hands, a posture that immediately triggered defensive responses from half the emergency team. Enhanced sensory configuration, someone whispered, preparing for multi-target acquisition. I'm thinking, Zara said into her palms, this is what humans look like when we're trying to process stupidity. Cognitive assessment of potential threats, Coordinator Cheshitar translated automatically. Tactical analysis in progress. You know what? Zara said, lifting her head and looking directly at Dean Clixandra. Fine. You want a demonstration of human behavior? Let's do this properly. The Dean's crystalline surface darkened with what her species used for alarm. Cadet Blackthorn, I don't think... No, really. Let's call the Earth Embassy. Get someone down here who can explain that humans aren't actually galaxy-conquering psychological warfare specialists. Absolutely not, Emergency Coordinator Keshatar interjected. Calling additional humans to the Academy would constitute a clear escalation to pack-level threat status. Perfect, Zara said with the kind of smile that had apparently been terrorizing alien species for decades without her knowledge. Let's escalate. Dean Clixandra made a sound like wind chimes in a tornado. Cadet Blackthorn, you're talking about involving Earth's diplomatic corps in what amounts to an interstellar incident. I'm talking about getting someone here who can convince you that humans saying hello isn't an act of war. You want to import additional apex predators, Professor Vexthul said slowly, to resolve a conflict about whether or not your species is naturally aggressive. When you put it like that, Zara admitted, it does sound a little counterproductive. Code Red Protocols, Coordinator Cheshitar announced, reaching for his emergency communication device. We're calling the embassy. And that, Zara realized with growing horror, was when things were about to get much, much worse. Ambassador Elena Vasquez arrived 43 minutes later, wearing what appeared to be a floral print dress and carrying a thermos of coffee that had somehow survived 3 security checkpoints and a full-spectrum weapons scan. She was the kind of middle-aged woman who ran library fundraisers and organized neighborhood potluck dinners, which made her absolutely the worst possible choice for diffusing an interstellar incident involving apex predators. "Hello, everyone," she said brightly, making eye contact with Dean Clixandra and smiling warmly. "I understand there's been some kind of misunderstanding?" The Dean's crystalline structure immediately shifted to emergency opacity, her species equivalent of playing dead. 3 emergency coordinators activated personal force fields. Professor Vexithul dove behind a maintenance console. Ambassador Vasquez, Coordinator Keshitar managed through his protective breathing apparatus. Please maintain safe distances and avoid direct ocular engagement with Academy personnel. "I'm sorry?" Elena said, turning toward him with the same friendly expression that had just sent half the room into panic mode. "Did you say something about my eyes?" "Multiple target acquisition," the security system announced helpfully. "Human Pack Alpha identified, implementing maximum containment protocols." "Pack Alpha?" Elena laughed, a sound that triggered every prey instinct in a 50-meter radius. "Oh my goodness, is this about the eye contact thing?" Zara mentioned you might have some cultural differences to work through. From her position at the center of what was rapidly becoming a militarized zone, Zara waved weakly. "Hi, Ambassador Vasquez. Thanks for coming. This is not going exactly as planned." "Well, cultural exchanges always have their bumps," Elena said, walking casually through a room full of beings who were treating her like a mobile nuclear weapon. "I brought cookies. Would anyone like one?" The offer of food triggered immediate biological responses across multiple species. Scent analysis suggested the cookies contained refined sugars, processed grains, and synthetic additives. Clearly some form of chemical warfare designed to create dependency and compliance. "Chemical pacification agents," Emergency Medic Yarthok reported, his scanner working overtime. "Sophisticated drug delivery system disguised as recreational consumption." "They're chocolate chip," Elena said helpfully. "I made them this morning." "Personal preparation indicates advanced planning," Coordinator Keshitar noted. This was a coordinated operation. Dean Clixandra, speaking from behind her impromptu fortification, addressed the growing crisis with admirable professional calm. "Ambassador Vasquez, are you aware that your species is currently classified as a Category 5 apex predator by the Galactic Safety Commission?" "We're classified as what now?" "Highly intelligent pack hunters with advanced psychological manipulation capabilities and documented territorial expansion patterns." Elena blinked, an action that sent 2 security guards reaching for tranquilizer equipment. "Are you talking about humans?" "Your coordinated expansion across your solar system, the systematic elimination of competing megafauna on your home planet, and your species' alarming tendency to form hierarchical social structures all support this classification." "We didn't eliminate megafauna," Elena protested. "Most of them went extinct during ice ages and meteor impacts." "Cover story," someone whispered from the back of the room. "Plausible deniability for systematic ecological warfare." Elena looked around the room at dozens of emergency personnel, treating her like she might spontaneously develop fangs. "This is about evolution, isn't it? You're all descendants of prey species." The silence that followed was so complete that Zara could hear the atmospheric recycling systems humming. "What?" Dean Clixandra asked very carefully. "Makes you think that?" "Bilateral symmetry, lateral eye placement, herd-forming social structures, and the fact that you're all terrified of eye contact," Elena said, with the patient tone of someone explaining basic facts to especially slow students. "You evolved from animals that got eaten by things like us." "Like you?" Professor Vexthul emerged from behind his console, academic curiosity finally overriding survival instincts. Persistence hunters, pack coordinators, the kind of predators that followed herds for weeks until something stumbled. Elena's explanation was matter-of-fact, delivered with the same cheerful tone she'd used to offer cookies. "We're probably the only sapient species in the galaxy that evolved from something that actively hunted other animals." "Impossible," Coordinator Keshatar objected. "Predatory species lack the social cooperation necessary for technological development." "Do they? Or do prey species lack the aggressive curiosity necessary for scientific advancement?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galactic academic community had assumed about the nature of intelligence itself. "The advancement paradox," Dean Clixandra whispered, her crystalline structure resonating with what might have been awe. "Predator species should be too competitive for cooperation, but prey species should be too risk-averse for exploration. Unless," Elena continued helpfully, "you're dealing with a predator species that evolved cooperation as a hunting strategy and exploration as territorial expansion. Humans," Zara said slowly, finally understanding the scope of the cosmic joke, "are the only people in the galaxy who evolved from the things that ate everyone else's ancestors." "Which explains," Elena added, pulling out her tablet and making notes like this was a perfectly normal academic discussion, "why our basic social behaviors look like warfare tactics to everyone else." Professor Vexthul was furiously recalculating decades of research. Eye contact as coordination rather than domination. Verbal interaction as information exchange rather than territorial negotiation. Social gathering as cooperation rather than competition. Exactly. Though I have to say, your species have done remarkably well for evolutionary prey animals. Most predators never develop the kind of complex societies you've built. "Because," Dean Clixandra said with the tone of someone experiencing a fundamental paradigm shift, "we evolved to avoid risk and maintain group cohesion." "While we evolved to take risks and coordinate attacks," Zara finished. "No wonder you think we're terrifying." Elena looked around the room at the emergency response teams, the force fields, and the various pieces of anti-predator equipment. "Is this why humans were quarantined to Earth for so long? Because everyone thought we were going to eat the galaxy?" "Among other concerns," the dean admitted. "Though now I'm wondering if our isolation protocols were less about protecting the galaxy and more about protecting ourselves from culture shock." "Well," Elena said brightly, "now that we've cleared that up, would anyone like to try those cookies? They really are quite good." 2 months later, Cadet Zara Blackthorne stood at the front of the same amphitheater, now serving as the Academy's first human cultural liaison. Her job involved teaching terrified aliens that the most dangerous thing about human social behavior wasn't the predatory staring, the pack coordination, or the territorial expansion patterns. It was that humans genuinely, sincerely, enthusiastically wanted to be friends with everyone they met, which, to a galaxy of former prey species, remained absolutely terrifying. But now at least, they understood why. "Today," she announced to a classroom full of students safely positioned behind reinforced desks, "we're going to discuss human recreational activities, specifically something we call team sports." The collective shudder that rippled through the room suggested that some things, cultural understanding or not, were going to take considerably more time to work through. But that, Zara figured, was what made teaching interesting.